Play the part. My fiancée. Just for tonight. No questions. It was perhaps the most honest lie spoken all evening, because this wedding was a stage, and every guest wore a mask of wealth and happiness. Raina Sterling, sitting alone, was the only one without one. That authenticity made her an outsider. Until the director of a new play appeared, Xavier Rhodes didn't just see her, he cast her as his leading lady. His whisper wasn't a pickup line. It was the opening line to the most dangerous performance of her life. The script was unwritten, the supporting cast was hostile, and the curtain was about to rise. Could she learn her part before the entire set came crashing down? Tell us, have you ever felt like you were playing a part? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get a front row seat for this high-stakes drama. Let's build a community of story lovers together. The ballroom of the New England estate glittered under a constellation of chandeliers, their light bouncing off crystal flutes and polished silverware. Laughter and clinking glasses wove a symphony of celebration. But for Raina Sterling, seated alone at a corner table, the opulence felt like a cage. Her white dress, borrowed from Chloe, clung softly to her frame, its elegance a fragile shield against the whispers that prickled her skin. She was a stranger here, an outlier in a sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns, her presence drawing sidelong glances from the elite guests at her best friend's wedding. Raina's fingers tightened around her glass of untouched champagne, the bubbles fizzing like her unease. She'd come for Chloe, her anchor since college, the one person who saw her beyond the labels. Black, lawyer, outsider. But now, watching Chloe twirl across the dance floor in her white gown, Raina felt the familiar weight of being the only one who didn't belong. The murmurs weren't loud, but they were sharp. Who is she? Chloe's friend, but from where? Each word chipped at the armor she'd built over years of navigating rooms like this, where her presence was a curiosity, not a given. She forced a smile, catching Chloe's eye from across the room. Chloe's face lit up, her blonde hair catching the light as she waved. But Raina's heart sank. She didn't want to dim her friend's day, but the effort to belong was exhausting. She'd give it another hour, then slip away, back to her quiet apartment, her case files, her world where she could breathe without scrutiny. As she scanned the room, her gaze snagged on a figure moving through the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, he cut through the sea of guests with purpose, his tailored suit accentuating a quiet confidence. He wasn't dancing or mingling, his path was arrow straight, aimed at her table. Raina's pulse quickened. She didn't know him, but something in his stride, urgent, deliberate, set her nerves alight. He stopped at her table, sliding into the empty chair beside her without a word. Up close, his gray-blue eyes held a storm of intensity, tempered by something softer, almost pleading. His hair, dark and slightly tousled, fell just above his brow, a contrast to the polished chaos around them. He leaned in, his voice low, barely audible over the music. Play the part, no questions. Raina froze, her breath catching. "Excuse me?" she whispered, her lawyer's instincts kicking in, searching his face for a hint of motive. Was this a prank? A mistake? His expression didn't waver, earnest, urgent, and oddly vulnerable. "My fiancée," he said, his voice dropping further, each word deliberate. "Just for tonight." Her mind raced. She didn't know this man, didn't know him anything. Yet something in his gaze, raw, unguarded, held her in place. She opened her mouth to protest, but the weight of the room's stares pressed harder now, as if the guests sensed a shift. Across the ballroom, a man with slick blonde hair and a polished smile watched them, his eyes narrowing. Raina's stomach twisted. Whoever this stranger was, he'd just painted a target on her back. "Why me?" she hissed, keeping her voice low. Her fingers tightened on the glass, a reflex against the chaos threatening to swallow her. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Because you're the only one here they can't ignore." His words were a lifeline, not a compliment, laced with a desperation that mirrored her own isolation. "Please, I need you." Raina's heart thudded. She should walk away, leave this gilded cage and its mysteries behind. But the room felt smaller now, the whispers louder, and the stranger's plea anchored her. She thought of Chloe, radiant and oblivious, and of the countless times she'd fought to prove her worth in rooms like this. Maybe, just this once, she could play a different role, not to prove herself, but to unravel whatever game this man was playing. She set her glass down, the clink sharp against the table. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Xavier Rhodes," he said, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "And you?" "Raina Sterling." She met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "If I do this, you owe me answers." He nodded, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "Deal." Before she could second-guess herself, Xavier stood, offering his hand. The room seemed to tilt, every eye turning toward them. Raina rose, her dress shimmering faintly under the chandeliers. She took his hand, its warmth grounding her, and let him lead her toward the center of the ballroom. The whispers grew louder, but so did her pulse, a defiant rhythm that drowned them out. As they reached the main table where Chloe and a cluster of sharply dressed figures waited, Xavier's grip tightened briefly, a silent promise. Raina straightened, her chin lifting. Whatever this was, game, gamble, or something deeper, she was in it now, and she wasn't here to fade into the background. Raina's pulse thundered in her ears as Xavier's hand, warm and steady, guided her through the ballroom's glittering haze. His words, "my fiancé," still hung in the air, a reckless gambit that had turned every head in the opulent New England estate. The whispers that had pricked at her solitude moments ago now swelled into a low hum, sharp with curiosity and judgment. She straightened, her white dress catching the chandelier's glow, and forced her face into a mask of composure. Whatever Xavier Rhodes was playing at, she'd agreed to the role, for now. They reached the main table where the elite of the Rhodes family sat like a tribunal in tailored suits and silk gowns. Xavier's grip tightened briefly, a silent signal, before he spoke, his voice clear and unwavering. "Family, I'd like you to meet Raina Sterling, my fiancée." The table fell silent. The clink of silverware and murmur of conversation snuffed out like a candle. Raina's stomach twisted, but she held her ground, her lawyer's instincts scanning the faces before her. Chloe, the bride, sat frozen, her blue eyes wide with shock, a blonde curl slipping from her delicate updo. Beside her, a man with slick blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, leaned forward, his gold ring glinting as he clasped his hands. Marcus, she assumed, the one whose stare had chilled her from across the room. At the head of the table, an older man in a wheelchair, his frame frail but his gaze piercing, studied her with a curiosity that felt like a test. "Xavier," Marcus said, his voice smooth as polished glass, "this is unexpected." His smile tightened, a predator sizing up prey. "We weren't aware you'd found such a charming partner." Raina's fingers twitched, itching to clench into fists, but she kept them still, her composure a shield. She didn't know Xavier's game, but she wasn't here to be underestimated. Before she could respond, Xavier's hand brushed hers under the table, a subtle anchor. "Raina's been a private part of my life," he said, his tone light but firm. "I thought tonight was the perfect time to share the news." Chloe blinked, her shock melting into a hesitant smile. "Raina, you never said," she began, but Marcus cut her off, his gaze locked on Raina. "How delightful," he said, the word dripping with condescension. "And what brings you into our circle, Miss Sterling?" A A shared passion for philanthropy, perhaps? His eyes flicked to Xavier, a challenge disguised as courtesy. Raina met his stare, her voice calm but edged with steel. I'm a lawyer, Mr. Rhodes. Trusts and estates. I'm more about protecting legacies than chasing them. The table stirred, a ripple of surprise. Marcus's smile faltered, just for a moment, and Raina felt a spark of satisfaction. She wasn't here to play the pawn. The man in the wheelchair, Senator William Rhodes, she guessed, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as if seeing her for the first time. A lawyer? He murmured, his voice weak but resonant. Interesting. Before the tension could snap, Marcus raised his glass, the movement drawing every eye. A toast, then, he said, his tone almost too cheerful, to surprises, and to family. He paused, his gaze sliding to Raina. Coincidentally, we have a gift for the family's future, a document for Father to sign tonight, a small matter to secure our legacy. Raina's instincts flared. The word document landed like a stone, heavy with intent. She glanced at Xavier, whose jaw tightened, his hand still brushing hers under the table. Whatever this gift was, it was no act of generosity. She thought back to Xavier's whispered plea in the empty chair. My grandfather's in danger. They're pressuring him. Was this the trap he'd feared? Chloe, oblivious to the undercurrent, clapped her hands, her laughter bright but brittle. Oh, how wonderful. A family moment. She reached for Raina's hand across the table, her touch warm but fleeting. Raina squeezed back, grounding herself in their friendship, but her mind was racing. Marcus's smile was too calculated, his words too precise. She'd seen men like him in courtrooms, charming, ruthless, always 3 steps ahead. Xavier leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. Stay sharp, he murmured. They're watching you now. His voice carried a mix of warning and trust, pulling her deeper into his orbit. Raina nodded, her resolve hardening. She didn't know the full stakes of this charade, but she'd played tougher roles in boardrooms and courtrooms. If Xavier needed a fiancée to unsettle his family, she'd give them a performance they wouldn't forget. As the table resumed its chatter, Raina caught a glimpse of Maya, her friend in a striking red dress, standing near the dance floor. Maya winked, her star-shaped earrings catching the light. A silent cheer that steadied Raina's nerves. She wasn't alone, not entirely, but as Marcus's gaze lingered on her, his fingers twisting that gold ring, Raina knew she'd stepped into a game far bigger than a single night. The document he'd mentioned loomed like a shadow, and whatever it held, she was now at the heart of it. Raina's heart thudded as Senator Williams' words, "She's family, invite her in," hung in the air, slicing through the ballroom's polished hum. The weight of Marcus's gaze, cold and calculating, pressed against her as she followed Xavier toward the main table, her white dress whispering against the polished floor. The crowd parted, their whispers sharpening into a chorus of curiosity, but Raina kept her chin high, her lawyer's composure a shield against their scrutiny. Marcus's forced smile lingered like a warning, his fingers twitching as if itching to reclaim control. Whatever lay ahead in the library, she was stepping into a battlefield. At the table, Chloe reached for Raina's hand, her touch warm but trembling. "You're full of surprises," she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and worry. Raina squeezed back, anchoring herself in their friendship, but her focus shifted to Marcus, who rose with a predator's grace, his gold ring catching the chandelier's glow. "Shall we?" he said, gesturing toward a set of heavy oak doors at the ballroom's edge, his tone too smooth, too practiced. Xavier's hand brushed Raina's under the table, a fleeting reassurance that steadied her nerves. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice low but firm, carrying the same urgency she'd heard in his first whispered plea. She nodded, her resolve hardening. She didn't know the full scope of his game, but she'd faced sharper opponents in courtrooms. If Marcus thought he could dismiss her, he was about to learn otherwise. The group moved toward the library, a small procession led by Marcus, with Senator Williams' wheelchair rolling steadily behind, guided by an attendant. Raina caught Maya's eye across the room, her friend's red dress a bright spark in the crowd. Maya's wink, paired with a playful tilt of her head, was a silent cheer. "You've got this." Raina's lips curved slightly, a flicker of warmth cutting through her tension. She wasn't alone, not entirely. Inside the ballroom's main seating area, Marcus pivoted, his smile sharpening as he addressed Raina directly. "Miss Sterling," he began, his voice dripping with mock curiosity, "what exactly do you do to capture the heart of my elusive nephew?" The question was a jab designed to diminish her, to remind everyone she was an outsider in their gilded world. The table stirred, eyes darting between her and Xavier. Raina met Marcus's gaze, her voice calm but edged with steel. "I'm a lawyer, Mr. Rhodes. I protect what matters. Legacies, families, futures. I suspect you know the value of that." Her words were precise, turning his challenge into an opportunity. A murmur rippled through the guests, some nodding, others whispering. Marcus's smile tightened, a crack in his polished facade. "Well said," Senator William rasped from his wheelchair, his eyes glinting with something like approval. Raina's pulse quickened. She'd caught his attention, and it felt like passing a test she hadn't known she was taking. Marcus recovered quickly, leaning back with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "A lawyer, indeed. And what brings you to our humble gathering? Surely not just Xavier's charm?" Another jab, this one sharper, implying she was here for gain, not love. Xavier's hand tensed under the table, but Raina spoke before he could. "I'm here for Chloe," she said, her tone unwavering, "and because I don't walk away from a challenge." The words landed like a gauntlet, and for a moment, silence gripped the table. Chloe's eyes softened, a silent thank you, while Xavier's touch lingered, a quiet signal of alliance. Marcus's fingers twitched, brushing his gold ring, but he pressed on, undeterred. "Admirable," he said, his voice syrupy. "We value loyalty in this family, which reminds me our little document awaits, a simple formality to secure Father's wishes." His eyes flicked to William, who sat motionless, his expression unreadable. Raina's instincts flared. The document again, Marcus's gift, was no mere formality. She glanced at Xavier, whose jaw was set, his gray-blue eyes locked on his uncle. Whatever was in that library, it was the heart of this charade, and she was now its centerpiece. As the group rose to move toward the oak doors, Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, meant only for Raina. "This is family business, Miss Sterling. I hope you're prepared to play your part." His smile was a blade, promising trouble if she overstepped. Before Raina could respond, William's voice cut through, weak but commanding. "She's family," he repeated, his gaze locking on Marcus. "Invite her in." The words were a lifeline, pulling Raina deeper into the Rhodes world. Marcus's face flickered with irritation, but he nodded, gesturing toward the doors. Raina stood, Xavier's hand brushing hers one last time as they followed. The library loomed ahead, its promise of secrets and power drawing her forward. She didn't know what awaited, but she felt the shift. Marcus's game was unraveling, and she was no longer just a guest. She was a player, and she'd come to win. The heavy oak doors of the library swung shut behind Raina, sealing her in a world of polished mahogany and flickering lamplight. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and wax, a stark contrast to the ballroom's glittering chaos. Raina's heart pounded as she stood beside Xavier, his presence a quiet anchor in the tense silence. Senator Williams' wheelchair creaked softly as his attendant positioned him at the head of a long table, his shadowed eyes fixed on the scene unfolding. Marcus, standing across from them, clutched a thick stack of papers, his gold ring glinting as he set them down with deliberate care. The gift he'd teased at the main table now lay before them, a ticking bomb disguised as a document. Raina's instincts screamed trap. She glanced at Xavier, whose jaw was set, his gaze locked on his uncle. The urgency in his whispered plea from the ballroom, "My grandfather's in danger," echoed in her mind. Whatever this document was, it was the heart of Marcus's scheme, and she was now in the crosshairs. Marcus's voice broke the silence, smooth and practiced. "Father, this is a revocable living trust," he said, sliding the papers toward William. "A simple formality to streamline your affairs. It ensures the family's legacy is protected." His smile was a blade, sharp and calculated, as he glanced at Raina, daring her to challenge him. Xavier stepped forward, his voice low but fierce. "It's not simple, Marcus. You've been pushing this for weeks, and I want to know why." His words crackled with defiance, drawing a flicker of irritation across Marcus's face. The room tensed, the air heavy with unspoken stakes. William raised a trembling hand, silencing them both. His eyes, sharp despite his frail frame, turned to Raina. "You're a lawyer," he rasped, his voice carrying a weight that belied his physical weakness. "Miss Sterling, tell me, is this document okay?" The question landed like a gavel, and every eye in the room swiveled to her. Raina's pulse surged, but years of courtroom battles steadied her. She stepped forward, her white dress brushing the floor, and reached for the papers. Marcus's smile tightened, his fingers twitching as if to snatch them back. She didn't flinch, her movements deliberate as she flipped through the dense legal text. Pages of boilerplate language gave way to clauses buried deep, written in the kind of legalese meant to obscure. But Raina was no stranger to hidden traps. She'd spent her career dismantling them. Her eyes snagged on a section titled Incapacity Clause. She read it twice, her mind racing, then looked up, meeting William's gaze. "Senator," she said, her voice clear and unflinching, "this document is anything but simple. According to this clause, if two doctors, chosen by Marcus, declare you incapacitated, he gains full control of your assets without your consent. You'd be a passenger in your own legacy." The room froze. Xavier's breath caught, his hand brushing hers under the table, a silent surge of gratitude. Marcus's face darkened, his fingers twisting his gold ring so tightly it seemed he might snap it. "That's a gross oversimplification," he snapped, his charm cracking. "This is for Father's protection, to avoid confusion in a crisis." Raina didn't waver. "Protection doesn't strip someone of their power," she said, her tone calm but cutting. "This clause lets you bypass the senator's wishes with a single letter from two doctors you control. That's not a safeguard, it's a takeover." She slid the papers back toward William, her gaze steady. "I'd advise against signing." William's eyes glinted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I see," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "Then I won't sign." The words landed like a verdict, final and unyielding. Marcus's composure shattered, his hand slamming the table, the sound echoing in the quiet library. "You're making a mistake, Father," Marcus hissed, his eyes darting to Raina, venomous now. "This outsider has no place meddling in our affairs." Xavier surged forward, his voice a low growl. "She's here because I trust her, unlike you." The air crackled with their standoff, years of unspoken grievances boiling over. Raina felt the weight of their history, a tangle of loyalty and betrayal she could only guess at. William raised his hand again, his authority cutting through the chaos. "Enough," he said, his gaze locking on Marcus. "We're done here." He nodded to his attendant, who began wheeling him toward the door. But as he passed Raina, he paused, his eyes meeting hers. "You've got a sharp mind, Miss Sterling," he murmured. "Don't let it go to waste." The doors opened, spilling the ballroom's noise back into the library. Marcus stormed out, his footsteps sharp against the floor, leaving a chill in his wake. Xavier turned to Raina, his expression a mix of relief and worry. "You were incredible," he whispered, his hand lingering near hers. "But Marcus won't let this go." Raina nodded, her mind already racing. The document was a glimpse into Marcus's ambition, but there was more to this game. She could feel it. As they stepped back into the ballroom, the whispers of the crowd felt sharper now, charged with the weight of what had just unfolded. Raina wasn't just playing a part anymore. She was in the fight, and the stakes were higher than ever. The library doors swung open, spilling the ballroom's clamor into the heavy silence left by Marcus's abrupt exit. Raina stood rooted, her pulse still racing from the confrontation, the weight of her words, "It's a takeover," echoing in the air. The document lay abandoned on the mahogany table, its pages a silent testament to the battle she'd just fought and won. Xavier's hand lingered near hers, his touch a quiet tether in the storm, but his eyes were fixed on the doorway where Marcus had vanished, a shadow of worry darkening his gaze. Senator Williams' wheelchair creaked as his attendant paused, the old man's sharp eyes scanning the room, commanding even in his frailty. Marcus's outburst had shattered the family's polished facade, and the tension now crackled like static. Raina felt the guests' stares, sharper than before, as they filtered back into the ballroom. She straightened, her white dress catching the lamplight, refusing to shrink under their scrutiny. She'd faced worse than their whispers. Courtrooms where her every word was dissected, boardrooms where her presence was a challenge. But this felt different, personal, as if she'd stepped into a war she hadn't chosen. Marcus's voice rang out from the ballroom, cutting through the murmurs. "This isn't over," he snapped, his tone venomous as he reappeared at the library's threshold, his gold ring glinting as he pointed at Raina. "You think you can waltz in here, Ms. Sterling, and unravel decades of family legacy? You're out of your depth." His words were a blade, aimed to wound, to remind her she was an outsider. Xavier surged forward, his voice a low growl. "Back off, Marcus. She saw through your scheme, and you're the one who's out of line." His stance was protective, his shoulders squared, but Raina caught the flicker of old wounds in his eyes, years of family strife surfacing in this moment. Raina stepped between them, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "I didn't unravel anything, Mr. Rhodes. I just read the fine print. If that scares you, maybe you should write better contracts." Her words drew a gasp from the nearby guests, and even Marcus faltered, his jaw tightening. She wasn't here to play his game. She was rewriting the rules. William's rasping voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a judge's gavel. "Enough." He raised a trembling hand, his eyes locking on Marcus. "You've said your piece. Now leave." The command was quiet but unyielding, carrying the weight of a man who'd wielded power for decades. Marcus's face twisted, but he turned on his heel, his footsteps echoing as he stormed into the crowd, leaving a chill in his wake. William gestured to his attendant, who wheeled him closer to Raina and Xavier. The library's lamplight cast shadows across his lined face, but his gaze was steady, almost conspiratorial. "Clear the room," he ordered softly. The attendant hesitated, then ushered out the lingering guests, leaving only Raina, Xavier, and William in the hushed space. "You've got a sharp mind, Miss Sterling," William said, his voice low but resonant. "I've been waiting for someone like you, someone smart enough to see through Marcus's schemes and brave enough to call them out." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with purpose. "I've known his plan for months, but I'm too weak to fight him alone. I've played the frail old man, biding my time. Your arrival tonight, it's the chance I needed. Raina's breath caught. The senator wasn't the helpless patriarch she'd assumed. He was a strategist, and she was his chosen ally. Xavier's hand brushed hers again, a silent acknowledgement of the shift. You played your part perfectly, he murmured, his voice warm with gratitude. But Marcus won't stop here. She nodded, her mind racing. The document was only the beginning. Marcus's ambition ran deeper, and she'd just made herself his target. But for the first time tonight, she felt a spark of purpose, a clarity that drowned out the whispers of doubt. She wasn't just Xavier's pretend fiancée. She was a player in a game that could reshape a family's legacy. As they stepped back into the ballroom, the crowd's murmurs felt less like daggers and more like background noise. Chloe rushed toward Raina, her eyes wide with worry. What happened in there? She whispered, tucking a blonde curl behind her ear. Raina squeezed her hand, a silent promise to explain later, but her attention snagged on Maya, who stood near the dance floor, her red dress a beacon in the crowd. Maya's wink was a lifeline, her voice low as she leaned in. You were incredible, Raina. Don't let them dim you. Raina's lips curved, a flicker of confidence returning. But as she scanned the ballroom, Marcus was nowhere to be seen. A chill crept up her spine. Chloe's voice dropped to a whisper, her hand tightening on Raina's. I heard someone say Marcus left in a hurry. He's planning something, isn't he? Raina met Xavier's gaze, his worry mirroring her own. Marcus's absence wasn't a retreat, it was a regrouping. Whatever he was plotting, it would come for them all, and Raina was now at the heart of it. The ballroom's clamor faded as Raina stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the stifling tension inside. The stars glittered above the sprawling New England estate, casting a soft glow on her flowing hair, loose and gently wavy from the evening's chaos. Xavier followed close behind, his presence a quiet anchor, as the heavy oak doors swung shut, muffling the whispers of the crowd. Chloe's warning, he's planning something, still echoed in Raina's mind, a shadow that clung to the edges of her thoughts. Marcus's absence felt like a storm gathering strength, but out here, under the vast sky, she could breathe, if only for a moment. She leaned against the stone balustrade, her hand steadying her as she stared into the darkness beyond the estate's manicured gardens. The weight of the library confrontation, her dismantling of Marcus's scheme, William's unexpected alliance, pressed against her, but so did the warmth of Xavier's gaze. He stood beside her, his suit jacket slightly rumpled, a sign of the night's unraveling. You were unstoppable in there, he said, his voice soft but fervent. I knew you were sharp, but you took on Marcus and won. Raina's lips curved, a flicker of pride cutting through her unease. I just read the room. And the fine print, she said, her tone lighter than she felt. But what was that document, Xavier? And why me? Her eyes searched his, demanding the answers he'd promised when he'd first whispered, play the part. He hesitated, his hand brushing the balustrade as if grounding himself. I owe you the truth, he said, his voice dropping to a confessional hush. I saw you months ago at a legal seminar in Boston. You were speaking on trust law, tearing apart a case with this fire. I couldn't look away, but I was too much of a coward to approach you then. His eyes met hers, unguarded, a storm of sincerity in their depths. Tonight, when I saw you sitting alone, I knew you were the only one who could stand up to Marcus. My grandfather's been under his thumb, and that document was his latest move to seize control. I needed someone they couldn't dismiss. Raina's breath caught, her heart a tangle of surprise and warmth. The charade wasn't just strategy, it was personal. So this wasn't just about saving your grandfather, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You chose me. Xavier stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers. I chose you because you're real, Raina. In a room full of masks, you don't wear one. His words were a spark, igniting something she'd kept buried under layers of caution. Before she could respond, he closed the distance, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was soft, unscripted, and achingly real. Time slowed, the world narrowing to the warmth of his touch, the quiet promise in his breath. She pulled back, her heart racing, but a smile tugged at her lips. You're full of surprises, Xavier Rhodes, she murmured, her defenses softening for the first time that night. The balcony doors creaked open, shattering the moment. Chloe stepped out, her white gown glowing under the starlight, a blonde curl slipping free as she rushed toward Raina. I've been looking for you, she said, her voice thick with worry. Marcus is gone, but people are saying he's digging into something. Old family records, something about a scandal. She paused, her eyes flicking between Raina and Xavier. What happened in that library? Raina squeezed Chloe's hand, grounding them both. I'll explain everything, she promised, but not tonight. Her gaze shifted to the ballroom, where the crowd's murmurs felt sharper, laced with speculation about Marcus's exit. Chloe's expression hardened, a rare resolve breaking through her usual warmth. She turned back toward the ballroom, her voice firm. I need to talk to my in-laws, she said. This marriage won't happen if they can't respect you, Raina. You're my family, too. She marched inside, her gown trailing like a battle flag, leaving Raina stunned. Xavier's hand found hers, his touch steady. She's right, he said. You're not alone in this. His words carried a weight beyond the night, a promise of alliance that felt deeper than their staged engagement. As they re-entered the ballroom, the crowd's eyes followed, but Raina no longer felt their sting. Maya caught her gaze from across the room, her red dress a beacon, as she mouthed, You okay? Raina nodded, a spark of confidence returning. But the whispers had shifted. Marcus's name surfaced in hushed tones, paired with words like records and revenge. A chill crept up her spine. His absence wasn't surrender. It was a calculated retreat. Xavier leaned close, his voice low. He's not done, he said, echoing her thoughts, but neither are we. Raina met his gaze, her resolve solidifying. The night had begun with a charade, but it was ending with something real, a partnership, a fight, and a mystery that was only beginning to unravel. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Rhodes estate, casting golden streaks across the oak-paneled study where Raina stood, her fingers tracing the edge of a polished desk. The ballroom's chaos from the previous night, Marcus's venom, Chloe's defiance, Xavier's kiss under the stars, felt like a distant storm, but its aftershocks lingered in the air. Whispers of Marcus's abrupt departure and his rumored search for old family records had followed Raina like a shadow as she'd left the wedding, her mind buzzing with questions. Now, summoned to this early meeting, she sensed the game was far from over. Senator William Rhodes sat at the head of the room, his wheelchair positioned beside a towering bookshelf, his ebony cane resting against its arm. His eyes, sharp despite the lines etched into his face, held a quiet intensity as he surveyed the small gathering. Raina, Xavier, and a handful of family advisors, their faces taut with anticipation. Chloe stood near the door, her presence a quiet show of support, her fingers nervously tucking a blonde curl behind her ear. Marcus was conspicuously absent, his empty chair a silent threat. William's voice broke the stillness, rasping but resolute. Last night exposed a fracture in this family, he said, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Raina. Miss Sterling, your clarity in the library showed me something rare, courage rooted in principle. I'm making a change, effective immediately. Raina's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression steady. her lawyer's instincts bracing for what came next. Xavier stood beside her, his posture tense, his suit jacket slightly creased from the sleepless night. His hand hovered near hers, a subtle gesture that grounded her in the room's charged atmosphere. William gestured to an advisor who placed a new stack of papers on the desk, a fresh trust document, its pages crisp and untainted by Marcus's schemes. "This is a new revocable living trust," William declared. "It protects my assets, establishes a charity fund for sustainable initiatives, and names 2 co-successor trustees, Xavier and Ms. Sterling." A murmur rippled through the advisors, their eyes darting to Raina. She felt the weight of their scrutiny, but it was different now, not judgment, but astonishment. William's words were more than a legal maneuver. They were a public endorsement, a shift in the family's power structure. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I'm honored, Senator, but I need to understand the scope of this role." William's lips curved, a glint of approval in his eyes. "You'll oversee the charity fund's legal framework and ensure its mission aligns with our values. Xavier will handle the investments. Together, you'll keep this family's legacy honest." His gaze softened, almost conspiratorial. "I trust you, Ms. Sterling." Not many could stand up to Marcus and walk away unscathed. Xavier's hand brushed hers, a quiet surge of pride in his touch. "She's more than capable," he said, his voice steady but warm. "But I have a condition." He turned to William, his jaw set with resolve. "Raina leads the charity. She makes the final decisions. I've built my own empire. I don't need the family's wealth. But I'll stand with her to ensure this fund does good." The room stilled, the advisors exchanging stunned glances. Raina's breath caught, not at the power being offered, but at Xavier's trust in her. He wasn't just her ally in a charade. He was handing her the reins, believing in her vision. She met his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them, a partnership forged in truth, not pretense. William nodded, his cane tapping the floor once, a final seal. "Done," he said. "The trust is yours to shape." His words carried a weight that settled over Raina, both daunting and exhilarating. She was no longer an outsider. She was a steward of a legacy, chosen for her mind, not her role as Xavier's fiancée. As the advisors dispersed, Chloe approached, her eyes bright with relief. "You're incredible, Raina," she whispered, squeezing her hand. "I knew you'd shake things up." Raina smiled, but her thoughts drifted to Marcus. His absence loomed larger now, a predator circling in the shadows. Xavier guided Raina to the study's window, his voice low. "Marcus won't take this lying down," he said, echoing her unease. "He's out there, digging into something, old records, maybe a way to undermine us." His hand lingered near hers, a promise of solidarity. As they left the estate, a courier approached Raina, handing her a sealed envelope bearing the Rhodes family crest. Inside was a single note, handwritten in sharp, angular script. "The truth lies in 1998. Her stomach twisted. Marcus's shadow had found her again, this time in ink. She showed the note to Xavier, whose eyes darkened with recognition. "What happened in 1998? Raina asked, her voice steady despite the chill creeping up her spine. Xavier shook his head, his expression grim. "I don't know, but we'll find out together." The envelope felt heavy in her hand, a new challenge in a game that was far from over. The late afternoon sun spilled across the park, painting the grass in hues of gold and amber as Raina walked beside Xavier, the crunch of leaves underfoot a quiet counterpoint to the week's whirlwind. The Rhodes estate, with its chandeliers and whispered schemes, felt worlds away from this serene Boston green, where no eyes judged her, no voices questioned her place. Yet the weight of the sealed envelope tucked in her bag since that morning at the estate pressed against her thoughts. The note inside, "The truth lies in 1998, was a shadow that refused to fade, a reminder that Marcus's absence was not defeat, but a pause. Raina's fingers brushed the strap of her bag, her mind replaying the past week, the trust document that had reshaped the Rhodes family's future, her new role as co-trustee, and Xavier's unwavering trust in her leadership. The charade that began with a whispered plea at a wedding had become something real, something that both thrilled and unnerved her. She glanced at Xavier, his suit jacket replaced by a simple sweater, his posture relaxed, but his eyes carrying the same intensity she'd first seen under the ballroom's lights. "You're quiet," Xavier said, his voice soft as he slowed his pace to match hers. "Thinking about the envelope?" His hand brushed hers, a familiar gesture that now felt like a promise, not a strategy. She nodded, her lips curving slightly. "It's hard not to. Marcus doesn't strike me as the type to leave loose ends." The note's cryptic message had haunted her, its reference to 1998 a puzzle with no clear pieces. She'd scoured her legal files for any hint, a case, a scandal, a transaction, but found nothing. Yet the threat of Marcus's return loomed, a storm gathering beyond the horizon. Xavier stopped beneath a sprawling oak, its branches casting dappled shadows across his face. "We'll face it together," he said, his voice steady. "But today, I don't want to talk about Marcus." He reached into his pocket, pulling out not a ring, but a pen and a crumpled napkin, his lips twitching into a playful smile. "I promised you answers, Raina. Now I'm asking for something else." Her heart skipped, a mix of curiosity and warmth sparking in her chest. "What's this?" she asked, her tone teasing despite the flutter in her stomach. He knelt, one knee pressing into the soft earth, his eyes never leaving hers. "No more charades," he said, his voice low but fervent. "Raina Sterling, I want a new contract, a lifetime one. Terms, trust, respect, and endless adventures. No roles, just us." He held up the napkin, a blank canvas for their future, his smile both earnest and mischievous. "Will you sign on?" Raina's breath caught, a laugh bubbling up as tears pricked her eyes. The weight of the week, the library's tension, William's trust, Marcus's shadow, melted under the simplicity of this moment. She took the pen, her fingers brushing his, and leaned down, her voice a mix of lawyerly precision and unguarded joy. "I'll review the terms," she said, her smile mirroring his, "but I'm inclined to negotiate it for a very long time." Xavier rose, pulling her close, their laughter mingling as the park seemed to fade around them. His kiss was soft, deliberate, a seal on a pact that needed no paper. For the first time, Raina felt not like an outsider or a player in someone else's game, but like herself, whole, seen, and chosen for who she was. As they pulled apart, Chloe's voice broke the moment, bright and teasing from a nearby bench. "Took you long enough," she called, her blonde curls bouncing as she approached, Maya at her side. Maya's red scarf fluttered in the breeze, her wink a silent cheer. "You two are hopeless," Maya added, her grin infectious, "but I'm claiming credit for this." Raina laughed, squeezing Xavier's hand as Chloe and Maya joined them, their presence a reminder of the bonds that had carried her through the wedding's chaos. But as they walked back toward the city, the envelope in her bag felt heavier, its mystery unresolved. At her office later that evening, she opened it again, the note's sharp script staring back. "The truth lies in 1998. Beneath it, tucked in the envelope, was a faded newspaper clipping, its headline barely legible. "Rhodes family settles dispute over land deal." The date was March 1998. Raina's pulse quickened. She showed the clipping to Xavier, who frowned, his fingers tracing the faded print. "I was a kid then," he said, his voice tight. "Grandfather never talked about it." His eyes met hers, a shared resolve sparking between them. Whatever Marcus was chasing, it was tied to this secret, a scandal buried in the family's past, now threatening their future. Raina folded the clipping, her jaw set. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice steady. "Together." Xavier nodded, his hand finding hers. The park, the kiss, the napkin, they were the start of something new. But the shadow of 1998 loomed, a challenge they'd face as equals. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And so Raina and Xavier step into a future woven with trust, love, and a mystery yet to unravel. What did you think of their journey? Did Raina's courage inspire you, or perhaps Xavier's quiet strength struck a chord? Maybe the shadow of secrets left you curious for more. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them with us, and let's talk about where this story took you. Thank you for joining me in this tale of defiance and discovery. Your presence makes it come alive. Until we meet again for the next chapter, keep chasing your own truths,